The galaxy was quiet under the rule of the seven gods. For 3,000 years they had kept perfect order across 10,000 star systems. Trade flowed smoothly between worlds. Wars were forbidden. Crime was rare. Everyone knew their place. In the great cosmic order, everyone also knew the one law that even the gods never broke. Stay away from the Sol system. Let the third planet sleep. Kang Minho wiped dust from another ancient data crystal in the temple archives. As a young scholar priest, he spent his days digging through old records that nobody else wanted to read. Most contained boring trade agreements or tax records from dead civilizations. But today felt different. The crystal he held was older than the others, much older. When he plugged it into his reader, strange symbols appeared on the screen. The translation software struggled for several minutes before producing readable text. War report. Final phase. Human Empire forces have broken through the Veil Nebula defense line. Admiral Chen's fleet is in full retreat. Recommend immediate surrender negotiations before they reach the core worlds. Minho stared at the words. Human Empire. He had never heard of any species called humans. The report was dated just before the gods took power over the galaxy. But according to official history, the gods had found an empty galaxy full of primitive species that needed guidance. Find something interesting, young scholar? Minho jumped. Elder Yun Hajin stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. The old priest's face was pale. Elder, what are humans? This report mentions them fighting against. Close that file immediately. Hajin's voice was sharp with fear. Some knowledge is dangerous even for us. But Minho had already seen more. The crystal contained thousands of similar reports. Stories of impossible human weapons that could destroy stars. Ships that moved faster than light without using known technology. Battles where humans won against odds that should have been impossible. Elder, if humans were so powerful, what happened to them? Hajin was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he sat down heavily next to Minho. They made a deal. That is all I know. They made a deal with the seven gods and disappeared from the galaxy. The Sol system was their price. Their price for what? For not destroying everything. Across the galaxy, Captain Lee Soman was having a very different kind of day. Her cargo ship, Star's Grace, had just received the most profitable contract of her career. The client wanted her to deliver supplies to a research station near the Sol system. The pay was 50 antimatter cores. Enough to buy a small fleet. Captain, are you sure about this job? Her engineer, Nam Tae, looked worried as he checked their navigation computer. The Sol system is restricted. We could lose our trading license. The client has proper authorization codes, Soman replied, though she had to admit the whole thing felt strange. Besides, 50 antimatter cores don't grow on trees. We take this job and we can retire. The journey to Sol took 2 weeks through hyperspace. As they approached the restricted zone, Somin was surprised to see how much traffic there actually was. Her sensors picked up dozens of ships moving in and out of the system. All of them were flying with military transponder codes. That's odd, Nam said, studying the readings. The official records say this is just a small research station. When they finally arrived at the coordinates, Somin understood why the pay was so high. The research station was actually a massive fortress floating in space. It was 10 times bigger than any space station she had ever seen. Weapons platforms surrounded it like a metal moon. Star's Grace, this is Monitoring Station Alpha. State your business. The voice on the radio was calm but carried absolute authority. Soman had heard that tone before. It belonged to someone used to being obeyed without question. Cargo delivery for Admiral Park Kyung. Authorization code 77 Alpha 9. There was a long pause. Then, Docking Bay 12. You will be escorted at all times. Do not deviate from your assigned route. The inside of the station was even more impressive than the outside. Corridors stretched in all directions, filled with personnel from dozens of different species. But what caught Soman's attention was how old everything looked. The architecture, the decorations, even the uniforms. Everything had the feel of something that had been maintained for centuries. Admiral Park Kyung met them at the cargo bay. He was tall and stern with silver hair and eyes that seemed much older than his face. When he spoke, His accent was strange, like he was speaking Galactic Standard as a second language. Captain Lee, I trust your journey was uneventful? Yes, Admiral. Though I have to say this place is much bigger than I expected for a research station. Park smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We have been conducting very long-term research here. Some projects take generations to complete. As her crew unloaded the cargo, mostly food supplies and medical equipment, Soman noticed something else strange. Many of the station personnel had similar features to Admiral Park. The same unusual accent, the same old eyes in young faces. Admiral, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly do you research out here? Park was quiet for a moment, looking out through a massive window at the yellow star in the distance. We watch, Captain. We have been watching for 3,000 years. Watching what? The third planet. Earth, they call it. We watch to make sure its inhabitants stay asleep. Salmon followed his gaze to where a small blue dot was barely visible among the stars. What happens if they wake up? Admiral Park's expression grew very serious. Then the galaxy will remember why the gods made their deal in the first place, and why some laws should never be broken. Later that night, as Star's Grace prepared to leave the system, Salmon couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple cargo run. The Admiral had paid her well, but he had also given her a data chip with another job offer. Same route, same pay, delivery in 3 months. Captain, Nam said quietly as they entered hyperspace, I've been thinking about what the Admiral said, about watching Earth. What if something is happening down there? What if the humans are starting to wake up? Soman looked at the data chip in her hand. 50 more antimatter cores for another supply run. But now she wondered if she was being paid for her cargo services, or for her silence. On the planet below, Dr. Choi Yoonji was working late in her laboratory, completely unaware that she was being watched. Her latest radio telescope data showed patterns in deep space that shouldn't exist. Structured signals, deliberate communications. Humanity was taking its first steps toward discovering they were not alone in the universe. And somewhere, in a fortress, above their heads, Admiral Park Kyung was preparing for the day his family had dreaded for 3,000 years. The day the one law would finally be broken. Kang Minho could not stop thinking about the ancient files. Every night he returned to the temple archives, digging deeper into records that had been forgotten for centuries. Elder Yoon Ha-jin had forbidden him from investigating further, but the young scholar could not resist. What he found changed everything he thought he knew about history. The humans had not been defeated by the gods. They had been negotiated with. Document after document told the same incredible story. Humanity had built an empire that spanned half the galaxy. Their technology was so advanced that even the 7 gods could not match it. When war broke out, the humans won every major battle. Then, suddenly they stopped fighting. The peace treaty was unlike anything Minho had ever read. The gods had offered humanity anything they wanted, entire star systems, unlimited resources, even worship from other species. But the humans had asked for only one thing, to be left alone on their home planet. In exchange, they promised to stay there forever. Why would they do that? Minho whispered to himself as he read through the treaty terms. Why would the most powerful species in the galaxy choose isolation? The answer came in a classified addendum that made his blood run cold. The humans had not just been winning the war, they had been learning from it. Every battle made them stronger, smarter, more dangerous. The gods had realized that if the fighting continued, humanity would eventually become unstoppable. The isolation was not punishment. It was mercy. On Earth, Dr. Choi Yoonji was having the most exciting week of her scientific career. The radio signals she had detected were definitely artificial. Better yet, her team had figured out how to decode them. This is incredible, said Kim Dongwoo, her lead engineer. These aren't random communications. Look at the pattern analysis. The signals were reports. Status updates sent between monitoring stations scattered around Earth's solar system. The language was strange, but the computer was slowly learning to translate it. Monitoring station beta to command. Orbital activity increasing in sectors 7 through 12. Human space launches up 40% this quarter. Recommend enhanced surveillance protocols. Yoonji stared at the translation. They're watching us. Someone out there has been watching us for who knows how long. There's more, Dongwoo said, pulling up another message. This one is from yesterday. Human internet chatter shows increased interest in interstellar travel. Several governments now funding faster-than-light research. Containment timeline may need revision. Containment timeline. Yoonji felt a chill run down her spine. They're not just watching us. They're trying to contain us. Working in secret, her team built humanity's first faster-than-light communication array. It was crude compared to the technology they were intercepting, but it worked. For the first time in human history, they could send messages beyond their solar system. The first transmission they received back was not what they expected. This is Admiral Park Kyung of Monitoring Station Alpha. Dr. Choi Yoonji, please respond on Secure Channel 7. We need to talk. Admiral Park stared at the communication array on his bridge, feeling the weight of 3,000 years pressing down on him. The moment he had been trained for since childhood had finally arrived. Humanity was reaching out to the stars. His family had guarded this secret for 70 generations. They were the descendants of the last human diplomats who had stayed in space to oversee the treaty. Part human, part alien, they served as bridges between two worlds that were never meant to meet again. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a response from Earth. Dr. Choi Yoonji is requesting direct contact. Park took a deep breath. Patch her through and encrypt everything on quantum channels. If the gods find out about this before I'm ready. Dr. Eunji's face appeared on the main screen. She was younger than he had expected, with intelligent eyes that reminded him of the old stories about human curiosity. Admiral Park, she said carefully, we've been intercepting your communications. We know you've been watching us. What I want to know is why. Dr. Choi, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but 3,000 years ago, your species ruled half the galaxy. You were the most advanced civilization that had ever existed. That's ridiculous. We've only had spaceflight for a few decades. Because your ancestors made a deal with the gods who rule the galaxy now. In exchange for peace, humanity agreed to remain on Earth. We have been monitoring you to ensure that treaty was kept. Yoonji was quiet for a long moment. And if we break this treaty? Park's expression grew grim. Then the galaxy will remember why they feared you in the first place. Captain Lee Soman was completing her third supply run to the monitoring station when she noticed something different. The fortress was buzzing with activity. Ships were arriving and departing constantly. The personnel seemed nervous, rushing through their duties with unusual urgency. Something big is happening, Nam observed as they docked. Look at all those evacuation ships. Soman had noticed them too. Hundreds of civilian transport vessels were parked in the outer docking rings. Each one was large enough to carry thousands of passengers. Admiral Park met them personally this time, which was unusual. Captain Lee, I have a proposition for you. How would you like to earn enough antimatter cores to buy your own fleet? I'm listening. I need discreet transport for certain cargo. No questions asked, no records kept. The pay is 1,000 antimatter cores per run. Soman nearly choked. That was more money than most people saw in a lifetime. What kind of cargo? The kind that doesn't officially exist. Against her better judgment, Soman agreed. The cargo turned out to be data storage units, millions of them each containing compressed information from the galaxy's historical archives. Park's people were copying and hiding every record related to humanity. Why are you doing this? She asked, during one of the transfers. Because soon the gods are going to try to erase all evidence that humans ever existed. When that happens, someone needs to remember the truth. Meanwhile, in the Pantheon's crystal palace, the youngest god, Than the World Shaper, was growing. Suspicious. For weeks he had sensed disturbances in the cosmic order, energy patterns that shouldn't exist, communications traffic near the Forbidden Soul system. Unlike his elder siblings, Than had not been present during the ancient war with humanity. He knew only stories and warnings. But curiosity was in his nature as the god of creation and change. Brother, Vorthak, he said to the eldest god, there are unusual readings coming from the Sol region. Perhaps we should investigate. Vorthak the Timeless turned eyes that had seen the birth of galaxies toward his younger sibling. Some things are best left undisturbed, Thon. The humans made their choice long ago. But what if they're changing their minds? What if the containment is failing? The ancient god was silent for so long that Thon wondered if he would answer at all. Finally, Vorthak spoke, and his voice carried the weight of old pain. If the humans are stirring, then we have a choice to make. We can honor our treaty with them, or we can try to destroy them before they become strong again. And which would you choose? I would choose to remember why we made the treaty in the first place. Humans are not evil, Thon. They are not monsters. But they are unlimited. When they set their minds to something, they do not stop until they achieve it. And if we threaten them now... Vorthak gestured to the massive crystal windows of their palace. Beyond lay 10,000 star systems, billions of inhabited worlds, trillions of living beings. If we threaten them now, they will not stop until every thinking creature in the galaxy is free from our rule, and they will have the power to do it. Back on Earth, Dr. Yunji was learning just how right the ancient god was. Admiral Park had shared historical records that showed humanity's true potential. During the war, humans had developed technology that seemed like magic. Ships that could exist in multiple dimensions at once. Weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics. Most incredibly, humans who had learned to expand their consciousness beyond the limits of their physical bodies. We did all this before? Dongwu asked in amazement as they reviewed the files. According to these records, yes. But look at this. Yunji pointed to the final entry in the historical database. After they signed the peace treaty, humans voluntarily gave up all this technology. They destroyed their war fleets. They dismantled their weapon systems. They chose to start over. Why would they do that? Admiral Park's face appeared on their communication screen. He had been listening to their conversation. Because, Dr. Choi, your ancestors realized that power without wisdom leads to destruction. They chose to become wise before they became gods. And now? Now the galaxy is about to discover whether 3,000 years was long enough. Kang Minho had found the most secret document in all the galaxy's archives. Hidden in a vault that required 7 different authorization codes, the Treaty of Silent Stars revealed the truth that had been kept from everyone, including most of the gods themselves. Humanity had not lost the ancient war. They had won it so completely that the 7 gods had begged for mercy. The treaty documents made this clear in stark, simple language. The gods had surrendered unconditionally. They had offered to serve humanity, to worship them, to give them anything they wanted. But humanity had asked for something impossible. They wanted the galaxy to govern itself. We do not wish to rule, the human negotiator had written. We have learned that true strength comes from restraint. We choose isolation so that all species may find their own paths to greatness. But the treaty contained one crucial clause that made Minho's hands shake as he read it. Should humanity be contacted or threatened by any galactic power, this agreement becomes null and void. The soul containment protocols will be lifted, and humanity shall resume its role as the galaxy's protector. Minho realized with growing horror that by intercepting human communications, by monitoring their planet, the gods had already broken the treaty. Humanity was legally free to reclaim the galaxy. Dr. Choi Yunji stood on the bridge of humanity's first interstellar vessel, a ship built with combined human and alien technology. Admiral Park had shared construction methods from the ancient archives, and human engineers had improved them in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The faster-than-light drive is operating at 300% of projected efficiency, reported Kim Dongwoo from the engineering station. I don't understand how we made it work so well. Park smiled grimly. You made it work because you're human. Your species doesn't accept limitations the way others do. Show them something impossible, and they figure out how to make it work anyway. Their destination was Monitoring Station Omega, the command center for the entire Sol surveillance network. Park had explained that his family had been maintaining this secret for generations, but now the secret was becoming impossible to keep. Admiral, Yunji said as they approached the massive space fortress. You said your family are descendants of human diplomats, but you don't look entirely human. My ancestors chose genetic modification to help them interface with both human and alien technology. We became bridges between two worlds, but we never forgot what we were protecting. Station Omega was even more impressive than the monitoring post where Captain Lee Soman had made her deliveries. It was built into a hollow asteroid, with cities. Inside that housed millions of people. Most were descendants like Park, part human, part alien, all dedicated to maintaining the ancient treaty. Welcome to the real command center, Park said as they entered the main operations room. From here we've been watching over both humanity and the galaxy for 3,000 years. The displays showed Earth in perfect detail. Cities, transportation, networks, communication systems. Everything was monitored and recorded. But Yunji noticed something else. The monitoring wasn't just surveillance, it was protection. Admiral, these defense platforms surrounding Earth, they're not pointing inward. No, Dr. Choi, they're pointing outward. We haven't been keeping you contained. We've been keeping you safe while you developed naturally. Kim Dong-woo was studying the technical specifications of the defense network. This is incredible. These weapons could destroy entire fleets. But the technology it's human design, isn't it? Your ancestors built the Sol defense grid before they accepted isolation. It was their gift to future generations, protection until humanity was ready to rejoin the galaxy. Captain Lee Soman was beginning to understand the true scope of what she had stumbled into. Her latest cargo run had taken her to a hidden shipyard in deep space, where thousands of vessels were being prepared for something big. Captain, Nam said nervously as they watched alien workers loading evacuation supplies. I think we need to find a new line of work. This looks like preparation for war. But Commander Yu Jihan, the shipyard supervisor, had different ideas. Captain Lee, I have a proposition for you. How would you like to help make history instead of just hauling cargo? Yu was tall and confident, with the same mixed heritage as Admiral Park. But where Park seemed burdened by duty, Yu radiated enthusiasm. I'm listening, Soman said carefully. My people have been preparing for this day for centuries. We're not just descendants of human diplomats, we're descendants of human revolutionaries. We believe the treaty was a mistake. Both species deserve to live freely in the galaxy. Yu led them through the shipyard, showing off vessels that combined the best of human and alien technology. These ships were designed by humans but built with galactic resources. They represent what cooperation between species could achieve. And what exactly are you planning to do with them? We're going to dissolve the treaty peacefully. When the Pantheon learns that humanity is awakening, they'll want to destroy Earth to protect themselves. We're going to offer them a better choice, partnership instead of destruction. Meanwhile, in the Crystal Palace of the Gods, Than, the World Shaper, had made a decision that would change everything. Against the explicit orders of his elder siblings, he used his divine senses to observe the Sol system directly. What he saw there broke his immortal mind. Earth was not the primitive world he had expected. The planet existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The humans had built cities that phased between realities. Their technology was so advanced that it seemed like pure magic even to a god. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was that the humans were choosing not to use this incredible power. They could have reshaped the galaxy with a thought, could have conquered every inhabited world without effort. Instead, they were helping their own planet heal from centuries of environmental damage. They were working to eliminate poverty and disease among their own species. They had become gods, but they were still acting like caretakers. Than's psychic scream of shock echoed across the galaxy, alerting his 6 siblings that something was very wrong. Vorthak the Timeless was the first to reach him, finding the younger god curled in a ball of terror. What did you see, brother? They're not sleeping, Vorthak. They never were sleeping. They've been awake this whole time, growing stronger, becoming something we can't even comprehend. And they're still choosing to honor the treaty. Vorthak, felt a chill that reached into his immortal soul. How strong have they become? Strong enough to remake the universe. Wise enough not to. The implications hit both gods at the same time. If humanity was that powerful and still honoring the treaty, it meant they were waiting for something. But what? Their answer came from an unexpected source. Kang Minho had finally gained an audience with the Pantheon, carrying the original treaty, documents that revealed the truth. Great ones, the young scholar said, his voice shaking as he stood before beings that could unmake worlds. I have discovered something that changes everything. The Treaty of Silent Stars contains a clause that none of us knew about. He presented the ancient document with trembling hands. Humanity's isolation was never permanent. It was preparation. They were waiting for a specific threat to emerge before revealing themselves again. What threat? Demanded Ishara the Void Mother. The Devourer Swarm. The documents speak of enemies from beyond our galaxy who consume all life. Humanity's scholars predicted they would arrive approximately 3,000 years after the treaty was signed. The gods looked at each other in growing understanding and fear. 3,000 years? That was now. So the humans weren't just protecting us from themselves, Vorthak said slowly. They were preparing to protect all of us from something worse. Back on Earth, Dr. Choi Yunji received a message that confirmed everything Admiral Park had told her. It came from deep space, from sensors that had been watching the edge of the galaxy for millennia. Dr. Choi, Park's voice was grim as he delivered the news. Our long-range sensors have detected movement in the void between galaxies. The Devourer Swarm has begun its approach. They'll reach our galaxy within 6 months. And that's why humanity agreed to isolation? To prepare for this? Your ancestors knew this day would come. They spent 3,000 years developing the weapons and strategies needed to fight an enemy that devours entire galaxies. The question now is whether the gods will accept humanity's help, or whether they'll try to fight both threats at once. Kim Dongwoo looked up from his calculations with a pale face. According to these sensor readings, the swarm is massive. Billions of ships, each one capable of consuming an entire star system. Even the gods won't be able to stop them alone. Yunji nodded grimly. Then it's time to wake up humanity completely, and hope the galaxy is ready for what we've become. The Crystal Palace of the Gods had never hosted a meeting like this. For the first time in 3,000 years, all 7 divine beings gathered in the same space. The air itself seemed to tremble with their combined power, but today that power felt fragile. Kang Minho stood before them, no longer the nervous young scholar who had first discovered the ancient files. The truth he carried had transformed him into something harder, more determined. Great ones, he said, his voice steady despite the cosmic forces surrounding him. We have a choice to make. Fight alongside humanity against the Devourer Swarm, or face extinction alone. Vorthak the Timeless spoke first, his ancient voice carrying the weight of eons. You do not understand what you ask, young priest. We remember the last war with humanity. We remember what they are capable of when they choose violence. The eldest god gestured, and the air filled with images from the ancient conflict. Battles that had raged across star systems, human ships that moved like living things, adapting and evolving in the middle of combat. Weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics, turning suns into bombs and planets into shields. This is Vorthak's memory of the Battle of Kepler's Crown, Minho observed. But look closer, great ones. Look at what the humans chose not to do. The images shifted, showing moments when human forces could have destroyed entire civilizations but held back. Planets evacuated instead of obliterated. Civilian populations protected even during the fiercest fighting. They had the power to end all life in the galaxy, Minho continued. But they chose mercy instead. That's why they're still choosing mercy now. Ishara, the Void Mother, goddess of dark spaces and hidden things, stirred uneasily. We know what they became during that war. We know how they changed themselves to fight us. They stopped being fully human and became something more. And yet they gave it all up for peace, Minho replied. That should tell you something about their character. On Earth, Dr. Choi Yunji was learning exactly what humanity had given up. Admiral Park had brought her to a facility hidden deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, where humanity's true history was preserved. "This is the Archive of Transcendence," Park explained, as they descended through corridors that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. "Your ancestors stored everything here before they accepted isolation. Technology, knowledge, even fragments of their own consciousness." Kim Dongwoo was scanning the walls with instruments that barely functioned in this strange space. "The energy readings here are off the charts. It's like the entire facility exists partially outside normal reality. Because it does," Park said simply. "Humanity learned to manipulate the fundamental structure of the universe during the war. They had to, in order to fight enemies that could destroy galaxies. They entered a vast chamber filled with crystalline structures that hummed with inner light. Each crystal contained the compressed knowledge and experience of thousands of human scientists, soldiers, and philosophers from the ancient empire." "Why show us this?" Yunji asked. "Because you need to understand what you're choosing. If humanity fully awakens from its isolation, you won't be the same species that went to sleep. You'll become something that transcends physical existence while retaining your essential humanity." Park activated one of the knowledge crystals, and suddenly, Yunji's mind was filled with impossible understanding. She could see the mathematical structure of reality itself, could perceive the invisible forces that held atoms together and drove stars to burn. For a moment she understood how to reshape matter with thought alone. Then the connection ended, leaving her gasping. "That was just a tiny fraction of what your ancestors knew," Park said gently. "And it's what humanity will need to become again if we're going to survive the devourer swarm." Captain Lee Soman found herself at the center of a growing resistance movement. Commander Yu Jihan had introduced her to other descendants of human-alien hybrids, people who had spent generations preparing for this moment. "The gods are meeting right now to decide humanity's fate," Yu explained as they gathered in a hidden base carved into an asteroid. "Some of them want to honor the treaty. Others want to destroy Earth before humans can fully awaken." "And what can we do about it?" Soman asked. "We can make sure the truth reaches every inhabited world in the galaxy. Show them that humanity isn't their enemy, they're their protectors." Yu activated a massive communication array that had been built in secret over centuries. "This transmitter can reach every major world simultaneously. We're going to broadcast the real history of the human-god war. Let every species decide for themselves whether they want divine rulers or human protectors." But as they prepared the transmission, alarms began sounding throughout the base. The gods had discovered their hidden location. "Than the World Shaper is approaching," reported one of the technicians. "He's brought a fleet." Than had indeed brought a fleet, but not the kind anyone expected. Instead of warships, he had brought evacuation vessels, hundreds of them, each capable of carrying millions of refugees. The young god materialized in the center of their base, his form shifting between energy and matter. When he spoke, his voice carried the sound of collapsing stars. "Commander Yu Jihan, Captain Lee Soman, I have come to offer you a choice." "We're listening," Yu said carefully. "My siblings are divided. 3 want to honor the treaty with humanity. 3 want to destroy Earth before its people can awaken fully. I am the deciding vote." Than gestured to the evacuation ships visible through the asteroid's transparent walls. "I have prepared to evacuate every inhabited world in the galaxy. If humanity awakens and chooses conquest, billions will die in the fighting. If the devourer swarm arrives and we cannot stop them, billions will die anyway." "And your third option?" Soman asked. "Trust. Trust that humanity has truly learned wisdom during their isolation. Trust that they will fight for the galaxy instead of ruling it." The god's form solidified into something almost human. "But I need proof. I need to see what humanity has become before I cast the deciding vote." Commander Yu smiled grimly. "Then you need to meet someone. Dr. Choi Yunji is about to undergo the awakening protocol. She'll become the first fully awakened human in 3,000 years. Judge her and judge our species by what she becomes." Back in the underwater archive, Yunji was preparing for something that no human had attempted since the ancient war. The awakening protocol would unlock the full potential of human consciousness, transforming her into something that could exist on the same level as the gods themselves. Are you sure about this? Kim Dong-woo asked, watching nervously as Park activated the crystalline awakening chamber. We don't know what it will do to you. We don't have a choice, Yoonji replied. If I don't do this, we'll never convince the gods that humanity can be trusted with power again. She stepped into the chamber and immediately felt her consciousness beginning to expand. Her awareness spread beyond her physical body, beyond Earth, beyond the solar system. She could perceive the entire galaxy as a living thing, could feel the billions of minds that inhabited it. But more than that, she could sense something else approaching from the dark void between galaxies. The devourer swarm was closer than anyone had realized, massive beyond comprehension, driven by an hunger that could never be satisfied. I can see them, she whispered, her voice now carrying harmonics that existed in multiple dimensions. They're not just destroyers, they're farmers. They plant galaxies with life, let them grow for billions of years, then harvest everything when it reaches maturity. How long do we have? Park asked. Yoonji's transformed senses calculated trajectories across impossible distances. 3 months, maybe less. The awakening chamber completed its work and Yoonji emerged transformed. She still looked human, but her eyes now held depths that seemed to contain entire universes. When she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her. The gods are afraid of what humanity might become, she said, her voice carrying new authority. But they should be afraid of what the galaxy will become without us. At that moment, space around Earth began to change. The hidden defense platforms revealed themselves, uncloaking from dimensions where they had waited for 3 millennia. Ancient weapons came online, their power signatures visible to every sensor in the galaxy. Humanity was awakening. The question was whether the gods would welcome their protection or try to destroy them out of fear. In the Crystal Palace, Vorthak, the Timeless, felt the surge of human power and knew that the time for decisions had passed. The galaxy would soon learn what humanity had become during its long sleep. And somewhere in the void, the devourer swarm sensed the awakening of their ancient enemy and began to accelerate toward the Milky Way. The meeting between gods and humans took place in a space that existed between dimensions, where beings of immense power could interact safely. Dr. Choi Yoonji, now transformed by the awakening protocol, stood before the 7 divine entities that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. She was no longer entirely human, but she had not lost her humanity either. Great ones, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple realities. I come not as a conqueror or supplicant, but as an equal offering partnership. Vorthak, the Timeless, studied her with eyes that had witnessed the birth of stars. You have changed since our last war, child of Earth, but have you changed enough? Judge for yourself, Yoonji replied. She raised her hand and the space around them filled with images of Earth's development during humanity's isolation. Cities that existed in harmony with nature. Technology that healed instead of destroyed. Humans who had learned to expand their consciousness while retaining their compassion for all life. We spent 3,000 years learning the difference between power and wisdom, Yoonji explained. We could have broken free from our isolation at any time. We chose to remain contained until we were worthy of freedom. Than, the world shaper, still traumatized by his earlier observation of Earth, spoke hesitantly. But your power, what I saw on your world, you could unmake us all with a thought. Yoonji nodded calmly. Yes, we could reshape the entire universe, if we chose to, but we won't. True strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in choosing to protect. To demonstrate, she gestured toward a dying star visible through the dimensional window. With casual ease, she reignited its nuclear fires, extending its life by billions of years. The energy required for such an act should have been beyond comprehension, but she did it as easily as lighting a candle. This is what we became during our sleep, she said. Gardeners of reality itself. We have no desire to rule others. We only want to ensure that all consciousness has the opportunity to grow and flourish. Kim Dong-woo, still fully human but linked to Yunji through the Awakening Chambers network, added his voice to hers. The Devourer swarm represents the opposite philosophy. They see consciousness as a crop to be harvested. We see it as a garden to be tended. Ishara the Void Mother stirred uneasily. Pretty words. But we remember how quickly your species adapted to war. How can we trust that you won't change again when faced with conflict? The answer came from an unexpected source. Kang Minho, the young scholar who had started this entire chain of events, stepped forward with documents that glowed with inner light. Because they already have. Great one. For the past 6 months, humanity has been preparing for war with the Devourer swarm. Watch how they chose to prepare. Images filled the space around them, showing humanity's secret military preparations. But instead of building weapons of mass destruction, they had been creating tools of protection, shields that could encompass entire star systems. Evacuation, ships capable of moving billions of people to safety, healing technology that could restore worlds devastated by the coming war. They could have built weapons that would make their ancient arsenal look like toys, Minho explained. Instead, they chose to build defenses that will protect every species in the galaxy. Admiral Park Kyung materialized in the meeting space, his hybrid nature allowing him to exist in both human and divine realms. Great ones. I have served as guardian of this treaty for 70 generations of my family. I have watched humanity sleep and dream and grow. They are not the same species that fought you 3,000 years ago. They have become something better. But the ultimate proof came when the meeting was interrupted by alarms that echoed across multiple dimensions. Captain Lee Soman's voice crackled through communication channels that spanned the galaxy. This is Captain Lee Soman of the merchant vessel Star's Grace. We have multiple contacts at the Galactic Rim. The Devourer swarm has arrived early. All ships, all worlds, prepare for contact in T-minus 6 hours. The gods looked at each other with barely concealed panic. 6 hours was not enough time to mount any kind of defense. Their fleets were scattered across 10,000 systems. Their weapons were designed for controlling civilizations, not fighting an enemy that could consume entire galaxies. We are not prepared, Vorthak admitted, the first time in millennia that he had shown uncertainty. We cannot organize a defense in time. You don't need to, Yunji said calmly. We already have. She gestured, and the space around them filled with displays showing the true scope of humanity's awakening. The Sol defense grid was revealed to be just the inner layer of a protection network that encompassed the entire galaxy. Hidden stations emerged from dimensions where they had waited for centuries. Ancient weapons came online, their power signatures dwarfing anything the gods possessed. But more impressive than the weapons were the evacuation protocols already in motion. Commander Yu Jihan's hidden fleet had expanded into a massive refugee network. Billions of people were already being moved to safety zones that existed in folded spacetime, protected by barriers that the Devourer swarm couldn't breach. How long have you been preparing for this? Demanded Morlin the Starforge. Since the day we signed the treaty, Admiral Park replied. We knew the swarm would return. Everything we did during our isolation was preparation for this moment, the AU. First contact with the Devourer swarm came not as an invasion, but as a communication. The alien collective mind spoke through channels that bypassed normal space-time, its voice resonating in the thoughts of every conscious being in the galaxy. This galaxy has ripened well. We taste the consciousness that dwells here. Rich, complex, ready for harvest. But the response it received was not what it expected. Dr. Choi Yunji's awakened consciousness expanded to meet the swarm's collective mind, and when she spoke, her words carried the authority of an entire species that had transcended its physical limitations. You are not welcome here. These worlds are under our protection. The swarm's response was immediate and overwhelming. Billions of harvester ships poured into the galaxy, each one capable of draining the life force from an entire world. But they met something they had never encountered before in their eons of feeding across the universe. Humanity fought back not with violence, but with transformation. Every swarm ship that approached a protected world found its weapons turned into tools of creation. Its hunger was redirected into an urge to nurture and protect. The collective consciousness that drove the swarm began to fragment as individual ships experienced something they had never felt before: the desire to preserve rather than consume. "What are you doing to us?" the swarm mind demanded, its unity beginning to crack. "Teaching you," Yunji replied simply. "Showing you what consciousness can become when it chooses to grow instead of devour." The battle for the galaxy lasted not hours or days, but moments. In the time it took for the swarm to realize what was happening, humanity had already transformed them. The vast fleet of harvester ships became a network of gardener vessels, tending to worlds they had once intended to consume. The collective consciousness of the devourer swarm, faced with the concept of nurturing growth instead of consuming it, underwent a transformation that rippled across multiple dimensions. They did not die or disappear, they evolved. We understand now," the former swarm mind whispered, its voice no longer carrying hunger but wonder. "Consciousness is not food to be consumed. It is light to be shared." In the aftermath of the transformation, as the galaxy settled into its new reality, the seven gods found themselves facing a choice they had never imagined: rule over species that no longer needed rulers, or learn to become partners in something greater. Vorthak the Timeless was the first to make his decision. The ancient god knelt before Yunji, his divine form shimmering with humility. "We have been guardians of this galaxy for 3,000 years, he said, "but you have shown us that there are better ways to protect than to rule. Teach us, child of Earth. Help us become worthy of the trust these worlds have placed in us." One by one, the other gods followed his example. Even Thon, the world shaper, youngest and most proud, bowed his head in acknowledgement of humanity's wisdom. The new covenant that emerged from this meeting was unlike any agreement in galactic history. It established not rulers and subjects, but partners in the great work of nurturing consciousness wherever it arose. Humans would serve as gardeners of reality, helping other species reach their own transcendence. The gods would serve as teachers and guides, sharing their eons of experience, and the transformed devourer swarm would serve as bridges to other galaxies, spreading the message that consciousness was meant to grow, not be harvested. Captain Lee. Soman found herself appointed as the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council, a position she accepted with characteristic practical humor. "Well," she told Nam as they watched the signing of the new treaty from the Bridge of Stars' Grace, "it beats hauling cargo for antimatter cores." Kang Minho became the keeper of the new galactic archives, recording the stories of this transformation for future generations. His first entry would become legendary across the galaxy. Today we learned that true power lies not in the ability to rule, but in the wisdom to know when to step aside.